Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for coming onto campus on a Friday afternoon. We know that this time of year that everyone is busy, but we're thrilled to have you on campus, and it's always great to welcome you to the Lead Library. My name is Maggie Farrell. I'm the Dean of Libraries, and I just want to thank you again for coming and introduce Amanda Malili this afternoon. Amanda is the director of our Teacher Resource Development Library, so the TDRL. It's located in our education building. This is a unique resource at UNLV in that it connects our teachers with what best practices are in a school library. It has curriculum collections, so we're working with our teachers who are developing their skill sets to be teachers out in the school district and throughout Nevada, as well as it helps teachers and librarians throughout the state in what the ideal collection should look like in a school library, in an education library. The collection also, in addition to books, has kits and multimedia so that we're training teachers in how to work with information resources. And as you all know, especially this afternoon, information is not just contained in books. It's contained in newspapers and movies and other media. So Amanda brings deep expertise to our efforts to connect to the school districts, to connect to teachers and librarians throughout the state, and ultimately our efforts to engage the community. And our resources at the UNLV libraries are resources for anyone within Nevada and within the region. So if you have time sometime in the future when you're on campus, do go by the education building and check out the Teacher Resource Development Library. We'd love to see you there. So again, welcome. And Amanda, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you all for coming tonight. We are so excited for this event. We were given the opportunity to partner with the Sperling Kronberg Mack Las Vegas Holocaust Resource Center. If you have not heard of them, they are amazing. There's information out on one of the tables about them, and we are so excited to have them as a partner moving forward. Susan Dubin, who's in the back, could maybe wave, hi. She is an incredible librarian, incredible colleague, and she just made this all happen tonight. So you are all here because of her hard work. So thank you, Susan. And we are so honored as well to have Eva Schloss here with us tonight. She is a, yep. She is a Holocaust survivor and also Anne Frank's stepsister. And then we are also honored to have Paula Faust here today, who is the director of the film that you are going to see. So what will happen this evening? Oh yes, please applause. Thank you. So the schedule for tonight's event is we will actually be able to watch the documentary. It's about an hour long, and then after that we'll have a Q&A with Eva about the film, as well as hear from her and her story. A few logistics: restrooms are located across the hall behind those monitors with the flashing, the digital exhibit. So it's just straight out the door around that little glass partition, and there are restrooms. There's also restrooms down the bridge and to the right. There's water fountains there as well. And if you need anything at all, there's a variety of library staff members in the room. A lot of us are wearing these type of shirts. Others you'll see with silver name badges. So if you have any questions or need anything, please let us know. And with that, we're going to go ahead and start the film. What an incredibly powerful story of not only our past, but also our present and hopefully not our future. A really, really amazing reminder to us of things that are still happening today and that we have to be vigilant against. I'd like to introduce Susan Dubin. who is from the Holocaust Resource Center, and she is going to introduce the next portion.
First of all, I want to thank Amanda and the lead library and all of the people at UNLV who gave us the opportunity to partner with them to bring this incredible film for all of us to see. Right now, we're going to be very privileged to hear from Paula Faus, who is the director and producer of this film, and I think you can all agree with me, it was an amazing experience to see it. Thank you, Paula. I also want to introduce Eva Schloss, who is Anne Frank's stepsister and a survivor herself. She has written several books on her own, has spoken to thousands and thousands of people all over the United States and the world. And we are very, very honored and privileged to have her with us today. And Paula and Eva are going to be available here to answer your questions about the film, and then Eva is going to speak a little bit about her story, and we are looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you again for coming and honoring us with your presence.
We will have some of the library staff with microphones, so if you have any questions about the film, just raise your hand and we will bring you a microphone.
Well, this is just a biology question. What was that about dying from eating their food? Was it because they were so emaciated, or was it? Yes, and yes. Okay.
Okay. Yes, it was not just, our bodies didn't have the strength to digest food. And that is what I experienced myself when the Russians came and they gave us wonderful cabbage soup. And, it was the first time we had some nourishment for weeks. And we just ate and ate and ate. But I've never spent such a painful night on a bucket because the food went just straight through it. And the next day people had died because the energy just wasn't there to digest the food.
Another question? Oh, over there. There's, I think I can get to her first.
Question I wanted to ask is, how long did it take to make the film as a full project?
We spent time trying to raise money to make the film, and then we had to wait about an extra 6 months to have the editor become available. He's a young man that went to film school at USC, and he's a very remarkable person. He's teaching now and living in Chicago. He's teaching at DePaul University. And then we started getting going, and our very first stop was the Shoah Foundation at USC. And they were great because they let you get the testimonies of Holocaust survivors such as Eva. The first time I saw Eva was in footage from the Shoah Foundation, and Eva's mother too. And they don't charge you a lot of money. They help you right away. So it was really good. Because when you make a film like this, some of the images, places around the world, various archives will want $1,000 per still or $800 per still. So that makes it prohibitive. And when you see that we've repeated shots, that's the reason why. Either you're not allowed to use more photos of the Frank family, or you just simply can't afford to spend, $800 or $1,000 per second. But then we ended up in a lot of places, like especially the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. They're incredible. And Yad Vashem, when they found out what we were doing, not only did they send us the images the next morning, like you'd wake up and there they were, but they completely waived any fees whatsoever.
I think we have one in the back, then here, then up front.
What prompted you to produce this film?
I met Jonathan Brent, who's in the film. I found out about the Evo Archives. Two of the founders of the Evo Archives are Albert Einstein and Sigmund Freud. And it's a collection that's now mostly in New York. And it's a great deal of books and wisdom from Vilna, from Lithuania. And this friend of mine, Robert Perry in Los Angeles, he's a producer, and he said, "Do you know about this?" And he handed me a big stack of pamphlets about Evo. And I said, "No, I have no idea what that is." And I looked through them, and one of them was named The Letters of Otto Frank. And it's a book with about 73 documents copied in that, which is the paper trail of Anne Frank's family, of her father Otto trying to get visas to get their family into the United States. And they also tried to get into many other countries as well. And Eva can tell you all about that in detail. But I saw that and I thought, my goodness, Anne Frank, she is an icon of tolerance. And children and people all over the world listen to her words even today, even though she's been gone for 70 years. And I myself was trapped in a religious riot in India in 1984. So I almost got killed. And so the subject just of tolerance, respect, and finding out what's really behind that kind of misunderstanding is something that's very important to me.
And there was a question right here.
The question I have, how did you perceive Russian treatment?
Well, I love these questions because the Russians came to liberate us, and they treated us exceptionally wonderful. They had great respect for us. They fed us. They took us away from Auschwitz because they realized there was fierce fighting in Poland, and they didn't want to fall us in the hands again of the Germans. So they evacuated. They were pursuing the Nazis. It was a very, very hard war at the time because the Americans wanted to come first into Germany, and the Russians were near, and you probably know about that. And so, but nevertheless, they spent time and goods and food on us. There were, in Auschwitz, there were perhaps 1,000 people left who they had to look after, but they evacuated many other camps in Poland. And they helped all those people. And we traveled for 4 months eastward with the Russians because we couldn't go back to the West. And they gave us Russian uniforms because we had nothing. And at every station where we stopped, they came with food. And really no complaints whatsoever. You might have heard when they went into Germany, they looted and raped and revenged themselves. But the devastations we saw traveling through those countries. The Nazis had burned down every town, every village. There was nothing standing anymore. And they had murdered millions and millions of Russians. The Russians lost over 30 million people. And the whole war, besides in 1944, when America and England invaded Europe, was really fought on Russian soil. And you should read a book about the siege of Leningrad, St. Petersburg. It's an amazing story how those people held out for 2 years, starving to death. 2 million people starved in that city. It was all frozen. They had no way of burying the people. It's an amazing story of endurance and courage and love for their own country.
And then we had a question up here.
I have 2 questions. One, is this film only in Vegas? And if they are in other places, what other places that they are showing this film that we just saw now? That's my question. The other question is, what do you know about what's happening now in Poland about the Holocaust?
The film is showing all over the world on international television networks, and it's screened in many places. It's screened in many interesting places, such as, where the hydrogen bomb was exploded. Hiroshima, Cape Town, all over the world in Holocaust centers. And we have an educational version, which is right now we are raising funds to translate it into 11 languages and to caption it. And there has been a teacher's guide written by the Keene Holocaust University Center and the Anne Frank Center. So it's been screening all over. It's a long process, but we're working at it very hard. And in fact, with Eva, we just screened it at the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, and Eva spoke there, and she gave an amazing talk. All the dignitaries were there, and it was a very, very moving screening.
What was the second question?
She was asking about Poland, what's happening today, I think, in relation to...
About in Poland, anti-Semitism again. Well, there is anti-Semitism again, not just in Poland, as in France. There is a bit in America as well, in England, everywhere again. But it is not just against Jewish people, it is just intolerance in general. In Egypt, Christian people are persecuted. In Iran and Iraq and in Afghanistan, Muslims kill each other. And, you know, there is just, again, a period of disconnection, and especially in religion, and hatred. And if you are not in the same religion, you are, and in Burma, is terrible, where the Muslims are thrown out, and many, many thousands being killed again. You know, that is, I don't know why. I went to school in Holland, and we learned about the 80-year war, when the Reformation, when Luther reformed, there was a Catholics against Protestants. For 80 years they fought each other and killed each other. So, and yes, there is anti-Semitism, but I'm not particularly worried about that at the moment. But nevertheless, that is why I'm talk already for 20 years, to teach the young people especially to accept each other for who they are. There's only one race, the human race, and whatever religion people have, that is a personal problem. And, you know, we have to accept that. And one religion is as good as the other.
But in Poland, they want to destroy anything to do with the Holocaust.
Well, not quite, because after all, there are many, many camps there, and millions of people go to visit those camps. They have Polish guides there, very, very good instructions, and you know, they know the Holocaust, what has been happening in Poland, and I mean, there might be individual people who want to stop all this, but in general, the government is still helping to get the message out.
I have a question. What was Mr. Frank's occupation?
What was Mr. Frank?
Occupation.
Well, it was a very, very old German family, and his father had a bank actually in Frankfurt, but it went bust after the First World War. And Otto was supposed to take over the bank, but there was no bank then. And this is actually the connection with the Strauss family. Otto studied in Heidelberg, which is a very famous university, and he met there the son, Charlie Strauss, of one of the Strauss sons, and they became good friends, and they kept up the friendship forever. Later, when he married my mother, they went even to visit the family still in America, and it was a very permanent friendship. And so he was actually very lucky to be able to get help from him, but even that didn't help. I just want to tell you more. So he learned a bit business when he worked in Macy's, but he didn't have, of course, the Frank family didn't have a store. But he did, you might have heard, there was a product called pectin, which is for people to make jam to thicken it. And Budi, that was Budi Elias, that was from his sister, the son, and his father got a representation in Switzerland, and he got that for Otto in Amsterdam, this pectin. So that was a sort of factories. They produced it and put it in sachets and sold it. And it was very, very popular.
My question is, where do you live right now, and have you been back to Germany?
What was that?
Where do you live right now, and have you been back to Germany?
I live in London since 1951, and so I came from Vienna, Austria, not Germany, and I have been back several times, but not till the 70s. But now I speak quite a lot in Germany as well, and actually all over. And I wouldn't say I've forgiven the Nazis. I know you might want to ask about forgiveness, but I have no bad feeling against Germany as a whole, and I've met many, many thousands of wonderful young people. After all, you know, it's 3 generations ago that it has happened, and young people are personally very, very upset what their great-grandparents and grandparents have done. And the amazing thing is that, you know, when I came back, I was full of hatred, and not just against the Germans, because against the whole world, because I realized, like you have seen in the film, if the world would have accepted Jewish people, the Nazis wouldn't have had anybody to murder. And Otto Frank, who was German, of course, himself, and when I said to him, I hate everybody, I hate the German, he said, you know, you shouldn't hate people, because the people you hate, they don't know, they don't suffer, but you will suffer. You become a very miserable person, which I was. And so he, who had really suffered enormously, had no hatred, not even for the Germans. And he said, actually, and that amazed me and my children as well, when he said, you know, I am through and through German, and I'm not a bad person. And he said, not every German was bad, but they were cowards. They didn't stand up. And that is, again, something I have to tell everybody, especially the young people. It's easy to look the other way around, but you have to take part in what is going on. You have to have the courage to speak up if you see injustice being done, and if you don't agree with something, just don't go along, because that is the thing what most people want to do. And that is what the Germans did. There was actually quite a lot of resistance, but it is not really known. Thank you.
I have a question. What is your comment or feeling, being a survivor, on people who don't feel that the Holocaust ever existed?
Where's the question?
Did that, who asked the question? Oh, back there.
Can you hear me?
Where are you? Can you get up perhaps?
Yeah, my question is, being a Holocaust survivor, what do you feel or comment on people who feel, with all the evidence that has, you know, that exists, that the Holocaust never existed?
Well, in Germany and Austria, it is an offense. People go to prison if they say that. And in England and America, it's freedom of speech. But personally, I think it's not really freedom of speech, because it's libel. Because the proofs are there, million of proofs, all the documents, all the photos, and I've been 3 times back in Auschwitz, and I've been seen the records. The Germans kept records of everything, every person who went in the camp, with exact name and country and age and profession, and what happened in what barracks they were in, what numbers they had. And all those photos who are well known about the Holocaust were taken by Germans themselves. So, you know, I think those people, we should not give them a platform to speak. We should just ignore them, because there are unfortunately still Nazis about, and right-wing agitators. And you know, how more attention we give them, how more they will speak. And we just ignore them, because we all know it has happened. We have enough proof of it.
Hi, I have a question about your belief and faith in God. During an event like this, did you ever lose faith or think that there was not a God?
Yes, in the camp, first of all, we were not a particular religious family to start with, you know, but we were very, and I'm still very, very proud being a Jew. I would never change my identity like people did do. People, I had even an uncle who went to England in a small town, and he had a little baby son, and he thought, well, I don't want him to suffer, and he became Anglican. And I would never ever do anything like that. But in the camp, the only thing what we could do was pray to God to stop this killing of innocent people. But God wasn't stopping it, or God was not all-powerful, or he wasn't there for us. And I came out of the camp not only an atheist, but I didn't believe in humanity either, because the terrible, terrible cruelty I saw, you know, made me lose my faith in humans as well. And but, you know, if you go through life without any belief, it's not nice, you know, you have really nothing to hold you together. And so slowly, and especially with the help of Otto, I started first to meet so many, many wonderful people, but as well, the birth of my first daughter was for me really a miracle, because I've been damaged mentally and physically. I was actually in a very bad condition, but I really wanted a family, and nothing happened. And eventually I had treatment, and I was able to get kids again. And that was really a wonderful, when I held my first beautiful daughter in my arms, you know, I said, well, life is beautiful. And from then on, you know, my attitude changed completely. But I still didn't speak to anybody about what I had experienced.
Paula, when you were putting the threads of this story together, did you have any interaction with the State Department directly?
I don't think we did, actually. I think that it's so far back in time. We were speaking with various historians, and they are the ones, you know, the researchers who've done so much work on the Holocaust or on the U.S. immigration during World War II, such as Richard Brightman at American University. And so he was really our main one as far as the historians. But I also wanted to mention, you'd asked earlier about where the film is. The film's streaming on Amazon, Vudu, Google Play, iTunes, Xbox, Vudu, those type of places. And if you stream on those sites, yes, you can. And I also wanted to let everyone here know that our mayor, Carolyn Goodman of Las Vegas, today's a very special day. She has said that today is Eva Schloss Day, March 2nd.
Thank you.
Are we good for more questions, Eva and Paula? More questions? Yeah? Okay.
I would like to thank you wholeheartedly for keeping this alive. I wasn't born till like 9 years after the war ended, and for a long time it wasn't any kind of real to me. And through the years I've tried to figure out what the mental state of the German people was at the time Hitler was coming to power that allowed this to happen. I read about there was youth camps and there was all kinds of stuff, and I've asked my aunt and people that were alive, but they were in America and they didn't know. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yes, well, as you can imagine, I've studied later a lot of history, and we haven't got so much time here, but just in a few words, the whole trouble was actually the First World War, because Germany, of course, lost the war, and the Allied, England, France, America, put terrible conditions onto the Germans, and Austria. And I've heard for stories from my mother and my grandparents. In Austria and Germany, after the war in 1918 till about 1925, there was practically nothing to eat. And there was jobless. People didn't have any work. People walked in the streets barefoot, like you would see now in, I must say, in Los Angeles. I've seen the tents where that's how the population was, you know, homeless. It was dreadful. They were not, and you know, Germany and Austria was very powerful countries before the war, and all their pride was taken away, and they were really it was like living in the gutter of the world. And of course, there were many communists. If a country is poor, many communists came, and especially it was started in Russia in 1918 as well after the war. And so there was street fighting in Germany and Austria, Nazis against communists, and this is really the fault, I must admit, for the whole world, because everybody was more afraid of communists, of Hitler. They said, let Hitler come to power, he will fight the communists, which he intended to do. And the Vatican as well. Everybody supported Hitler, actually. He would have been stopped very, very easily in 1935 or 1936, but the world didn't want to do that. And then, of course, when he came to power, that is still something which nobody can understand, because he was an uneducated man, but he had a few good ideas, and the one was he built the motorways, the first Autobahn, and then the Volkswagen, the Beetle. He said everybody was going to have a car. And so people thought, well, this is a man who can put life back to us. And he did at first. And things got better, and so even Jewish people joined the party at first. But he wanted to become more powerful, and then people didn't really like what he was doing, but then it was already too late. And then there was a wonderful film come out, The Darkest Hour, from Churchill in England. Anybody seen that film? Yeah. Well, you've seen the whole English Parliament was for negotiating with Hitler. And Churchill was the only one who said, he is the danger, not the communists. And he luckily got the Parliament on his side, and that saved the world, I must say. If England would have made a pact with Germany, I don't know what would have happened. So it's all really history. And, you know, after this war, the Americans didn't want to make the same mistake, so they had the Marshall help and give money and money and money to Germany. So when I came to England in 1951, London was still in ruins, and Germany was already completely rebuilt. And that's why now as well, you know, they are the most powerful country in Europe.
I have a question. I hope I didn't miss it earlier when I stepped out, but you became, well, you are Anne Frank's stepsister posthumously. So did you know her as a child? Did you guys play together as children? How did that work out, or how did that happen?
Well, this is something you probably all love to know. When we eventually were able to get to Amsterdam, was in February 1940, already during the war, and we moved to a big open square, and I think we have shown a picture of that, the Merwedeplein, and my father hired a furnished apartment because we couldn't bring anything, and it was quite small, and with no yards for children to play there. And after school, all the local children came out to play in this open area. And Anne and me were both 11 years old, and of course we met each other. she realized I was a new child, and she came to me and introduced herself very politely. And she took me up to her apartment to meet her family who could speak German to me. She was 4 years old when she came to Holland. She didn't speak any German. She had become a real Dutch girl. But I had difficulty, of course, with the language. And we were friends. And we did what you did at the time. Skipping ropes was a very famous game which we did. And hopscotch and marbles. And Anne was, like you've heard, she was very interested in boys. And when I had an older brother, and when I told her that, her eyes grew very big, and she said, "When can I come to your apartment?" So we did know each other, but I was really more a sporty child, and she was already. She wrote already little stories in school, and she was a big chatterbox. Her nickname was Mrs. Quack Quack because she couldn't stop talking. And so we were friends for 2 years till Anne's sister and my brother Heinz, we were both 16, got this call-up notice to be deported to Germany, and that with both families and many other families decided to go into hiding. Of course, the family of Franks went into Otto's office, and there were 4 other people. We were dependent on people from the resistance. Every occupied country had a big resistance movement, because not everybody, as you can imagine, didn't want to be occupied by a foreign power, and not a very good one on top of that. And so every country had this secret organization, and those people, some shot particularly bad Germans. They blew up trains and bridges, sabotaged things. When pilots were shot down and they somehow escaped, they found a hiding place for them. And they printed ration cards. But as well, they made hiding places available for Jewish people. So my father had made contact with people from the resistance, and they found us homes where we were able to stay.
After the liberation, did you go to a DP camp, a displaced persons camp? Where did you go after?
Well, you have seen that the people who were in Germany, and the Americans and the British and the French register those people, and most of those people didn't want to stay in Germany or in Poland or even in France. They wanted to start a new life somewhere else. And that was, of course, like you have seen here, it was a big tragedy, because the young people wanted to go to Palestine, but it was a British mandate, and the Arabs didn't want more Jews, and the British wanted to have power there and have the oil, so they didn't want to let the Jewish people in. So they had to go illegally, and you might hear about this. There's again a very good book and a film, Exodus, and the Jewish people did eventually try to, and the Jewish agency gave boats, old boats, which the boat ship, which many sank, and the bridges in the Mediterranean caught them and put them in another camp in Cyprus. So if you think about to have survived a German concentration camp and then be put by the Allies into another camp, was really very, very shameful. But as I told you, we were liberated by the Russians, who looked very well after us. And after, when the war finished, we went up to Odessa, which is now the Ukraine. And in my book, if you get it, there's a map. You can follow exactly the journey we did, as well with the time, how long it was. And then a New Zealand troop transport ship came, and we traveled through the Mediterranean to Marseille and up into Holland. And there we waited for news. We came in June to Holland, so from end of January till June we were always traveling. And Otto Frank was with us because he was liberated in Auschwitz with us. We could go, we wanted to go on board in Constantinople in Turkey, but they didn't want us there because they thought we might have lice or typhus or things like that. And then we went to Genoa, and they wanted to disembark us there, but again they didn't want us there. Only in Marseille they let us come. You know, so we were really still, even after the war, treated as, well, not as decent people.
Eva, we have some time left. I think it would be great, and I think all of us would love to hear a bit more about your story. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us today about your story and your experiences?
Well, there's a lot, I don't know. As I said to you, I came from Vienna, and we were actually very, very lucky that we could get out. You know, if you were somebody important like Freud, he was of course able to come to England, or if you were a composer or a film writer or anything who's important person or very rich, then you did get a visa. But all the other people, we lost many of our family members. At first we still heard, we got letters when they were taken to ghettos in Poland, but later the letters stopped and we don't really know what happened to them. And so as I say, we ended up in Amsterdam, and I just told you about what happened hiding. So in 1942, my father called us together after Heinz got his call-up notice, and my father told us, Heinz, you're not going, but we are going into hiding. But we couldn't find a family who wanted to take in 4 people, so we had to split up. And I didn't want to split up. I was very, very close to my brother and my father, and I started to cry. I was 13, and my father explained, if we are in 2 different places, the chance that 2 of us can survive is bigger. So he mentioned survive. And that was really the first time that I realized it's a matter of life and death. And when you're 13, you know, that's quite frightening. So, but we were in hiding for 2 years, but like the Frank family, in May 1944, we were betrayed by a Dutch nurse who was a double agent. She pretended she was member of the resistance, but she turned out she was really a Nazi. That's a long story, but it's described in details in my book. And so that was on my 15th birthday. We were taken first into a prison and then into a holding camp. And that was on a Wednesday, and Friday we were already called up to be transported eastward. And that was bad, really bad news, because we knew about the concentration camp and death camps in Germany and Poland. And that was the BBC, the British broadcast operation, who sent out broadcasts to all the occupied countries in their own language. And you were not allowed to listen to that, but people did, of course, illegally. And they always told about the war, but as well about the 300 death camps and concentration camp in Germany and Poland. And Auschwitz was always mentioned. And we were taken to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz there were selections. So when at arrival, first of all, men and women had to go to different sites because there were many different camps. Auschwitz was the men camp, Birkenau, the women camp. Any of you been in those camps at all? Well, you realize what a big, enormous areas it was, and Birkenau was where the women camp was, which was much worse condition because there were terrible wooden barracks with 3 high bunks. But anyway, there was a selection, and luckily my mother and me went to the right side. But we lost about half our transport, meaning there were no children. All the children and all the older people were taken away and killed, gassed. And then we were taken in after the selection. We walked into the camp, and the next thing was we had to undress completely naked. We were all tattooed. we got a number on our arm, and they told us, you're not a human being, you're just like cattle. And eventually we were taken naked still outside, and there were huge heaps of clothes and shoes, and we were thrown one garment and 2 shoes, which was of course never anything which fitted you. And that was all we ever possessed. And then we were herded like a lot of sheep into our barracks, which was 3 high bunks, and 8 people were like the width of this table. 8 people had to sleep in there. And there was nothing in it, just the boards. And from morning to late of night, we had to work hard. There was no food the whole day. Only in the evening we got a chunk of bread. And washing was practically impossible. So once a week we were deloused because we were full of lice. And yeah, and very often you woke up and the person next to you didn't wake up. So it's really a miracle that my mother and me survived. And there's so a lot of miracles happened. You know, very often people ask you, how did you survive? I said 2 things. I never gave up hope. And the other thing was that I had a lot of luck or little miracles happen. One of them was that my mother was selected to be killed and gassed, and I thought I'd lost her, but through a miracle she was saved. The other one, that when I just wanted to give up in the middle of winter, I thought my mother is dead. I had frostbite on my feet, I could hardly walk anymore, and my father appeared. Till this day I wouldn't know how that was possible, but he came and comforted me a little bit. I saw him 3 times and then I never saw him anymore. But all this helped me, and then of course the Russians came, which was, as I said, when Anne would have stayed in the camp, she would have been alive, because in January, when we were liberated, she was still okay. So a matter of, you know, who was taken out of the camp. And as well, you know, there were 300 camps in death camps in Germany and Poland. And that we were sent to Auschwitz was actually lucky, because in Auschwitz there was actually selection. There was a few years ago a Dutchman composed a book where he researched for many years, and he had all the transport who went from this Westerbork camp to Germany and Poland, all the children who were on those transport he recorded. And many of my friends, one of Anne's best friends, Susanne, and was my friend as well, she just didn't return. And I found her name, and she went to Treblinka. That was another terrible camp. And there was no selection. So everybody who arrived went straight through a passage with flower baskets into a gas. And so nobody survived there. So, and in this book, this transport, there was one before we went, and there was one after we went to Treblinka. So if we would have sent to this, I would certainly, I would have been killed on the spot. So, yeah, so this is basically the bad part of the story. Like I told you, I back to Holland, and Otto Frank helped us a great deal. My mother with jobs and advice, and he told me that I have to go back to school. I didn't want to. I thought I was already an adult. But he said to my mother, I have to send me to school, so I did. So I learned quite well, but afterwards I didn't know what to do with my life. And Otto and my mother decided I should become a photographer. And Otto knew somebody in London who had a photographic studio. And so I went for 1 year to London in 1951, and I lived in a little boarding house. And there was a young man from Israel who came to study economics, and we became friends. And we didn't tell each other not about our past. I told him I was Dutch, which I wasn't. I was actually still stateless. He told me he was Israeli, which he wasn't. He was a German refugee. And but we became friends, and after 6 months he said to me, Eva, will you marry me? And we can start a new life, and when I'm finished studying, I go back to Israel, take you. And I said, no, thank you very much. And he was a bit disappointed, but he thought, well, he'll see. I might change my mind. And then Otto Frank came over, and I told him that. And he got a bit shy, and he said, well, you know, your mother and me have fallen in love as well. And once you get settled, we like to get married. So I went back to this young man and said, you can marry me now? He was very happy about that. And Otto Frank went to my mother, and they married next year. And they were married for 27 years, and they devoted really both their lives on the publication of the diary. And like I told you, I got married, and we have 3 daughters and 5 grandchildren now. And so we didn't really know each other. We took a big gamble, but we were married for 62 years. Unfortunately, I lost my husband last year, but when I tell that in school, when I speak in school, you know, I was married 62 years, he said, how many husbands? I know, just one, and just can't believe it. So, you know, all in all, in 1986, I started to talk for the first time for a big audience like this. I was put on the spot. I didn't really want to speak, but that really changed my life, because till then I had it really imprinted in my memory, and I had nightmares. I couldn't let go, but once I spoke about it, I could let go, and I realized people wanted to know. And you know, and especially, I mean, I know we are all a bit worried about the future with many, many things, but basically I'm an optimist. I think our young people are wonderful. They all realize that we have to make a change in our world. We have to protect our planet. We have to try to stop the big arm industry. When I was now in the United Nations in Geneva, I said to them, you know, you are all the nations here, and I'm sure you can work together to get disarmament happening in the world, because this is a waste of money. We could achieve so much more with it, billions of dollars and pounds and whatever. Nobody would have to go hungry. Everybody would have housing. But, you know, we have to stop this. And they said, well, we are trying already for 20 years, but we have not succeeded yet. So this is something I'm very, very strong about it, that we have to stop those weapons, especially the atomic weapon. Because if this is going to be used, we are really going to ruin our world. And nobody wants that. So please keep that in mind. And as well, I know in America it's a bit of an argument now about weapons in general. And I'm not going to go into that, but you know, armaments have never done any good to anybody. So thank you very much. There's of course much, much more in my story. My mother was still alive when I wrote my first book, and she wrote actually 3 chapters, and I lost her actually 3 times, but I always found her again. So, and she lived as well till 93 years old. So thank you very, very much.
And everybody, Eva's books are out there in the front, if anybody would like to get. This is your 3rd book, the one that's being sold here today? She has 3 books. So there's one here today for sale, and it's really lovely. I've read it.
I want to say thank you to everyone to coming tonight. This has been an amazing experience. Please stop by and look at Eva's book and purchase a copy. And if you have any further questions, you can find a library staff member and we will help you in whatever way we can. Thank you. Have a good night and a good weekend.